Family violence, also known as domestic violence, is physical, psychological, emotional, sexual, economic, and/or legal abuse within a household with the intent of controlling a family member. The abuser may be a spouse or partner, parent or guardian, sibling, or even child of the victim. Physical domestic abuse includes acts such as pushing, hitting, strangling, or using weapons or objects to deliberately cause bodily harm. Psychological and emotional abuse covers behaviours of verbal aggression, threats, intimidation, humiliation, and defamation from the abuser in an attempt to psychologically manipulate the other into their control. Domestic abuse is illegal and intolerable behaviour in Australia. Family violence has a significant impact on the human development of individuals. There are three broad domains of human development: physical, cognitive, and psychosocial development. Family violence influences all domains of an individual's development. Physical development is concerned with the growth of children and infants. Family violence can heavily influence a child's physical development when neglectful abuse exists in a household. Neglectful abuse may include acts such as not feeding the individual and not providing an adequate standard of living for the child or dependent. When a child experiences this abuse regularly, it prevents them from having a healthy diet and lifestyle. This obstructs the usual growth process of children, having long-term effects on their body and brain. Cognitive development refers to the way in which a person understands and perceives the world and others around them. The cognitive development of a victim of family violence is significantly diminished than that of individuals who experience feelings of love and support in their household. Regular abusive behaviour can cause the progression of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, in an individual. This means that the victim is unable to recover from experiences of abuse and often sees people in certain situations as being a threat. Triggers of the experienced abuse may cause panic attacks at any time, and the individual has a heightened reactivity to particular environments or events that remind them of the trauma. PTSD can occur for many years if left untreated. This affects the victim's cognitive development as they experience extreme panic, excessive fear, and possess a defense mechanism to all situations that remind them of the abuse. Domestic abuse blocks an individual's cognitive development to thrive. Psychosocial development is concentrated on the advancements and changes in the social capabilities and the emotional and intellectual development of individuals. Erik Erikson explored the 8 different stages of psychosocial development that are apparent across the human development lifespan. Trust versus mistrust is the first stage, which begins at birth until just over 1 year old. This stage of psychosocial development is obstructed when family violence is apparent. Newborns and infants look for individuals to trust and build a connection with. These tend to be their mothers or fathers. However, when a domestic abuse such as neglectful parenting is occurring within the household to a child at such a young age, these children are unable to determine what is trust. The final eighth stage of Erik Erikson's psychosocial development research is the integrity versus despair stage. This occurs in individuals aged 65 plus and ends at death. The common question these people ask themselves is whether they lived a life filled with meaning. If they experienced family violence throughout their life, they may not think their life was meaningful. They may look back at their experiences and think that their life was filled with pain, suffering, and hurt. This abuse throughout a person's life can influence their psychosocial development, prevent them from adapting to life changes, as well as from developing strong social capabilities. Enough is a film directed by Michael Apted in 2002 that explores issues of domestic violence. The American thriller film is based on Anna Quindlen's novel Black and Blue, published in 1998. Slim, played by Jennifer Lopez, is a waitress at a diner where she meets Mitch. They get married, buy a house, and have a daughter called Gracie. A few years later, Slim finds out that Mitch has been cheating on her with several other women. When she addresses her concerns and threatens a divorce, Mitch slaps and punches her in the face, causing her to bleed. He challenges her to a fight, stating that if she wins against him, he will end the affair, and then says, "I'm a man, it's no contest." He also says that because he earns all the money in the household, that allows him to do whatever he wants. Sim speaks to her mother-in-law and her friends about the situation she's having with Mitch, and she fears for her and Gracie's safety. She plans an escape with her friends late at night. Sim manages to get Gracie and is about to leave the house when Mitch catches her and beats her to the ground. Sim's friends come rushing into the house. Mitch holds them at gunpoint, however lets them go as he didn't want to shoot them in front of Gracie. Sim tries to book multiple different hotels for her and Gracie to sleep, but her card had been cut off by her husband. When she manages to find a cheap motel, Mitch calls the landline of the room and violently knocks at the door. Slim and Gracie flee to Seattle, where Joe, Slim's ex-boyfriend, lives. Mitch's friends show up at Joe's house, threatening him, and Slim visits her biological father. After also being threatened by Mitch's friends, Slim's father then gives Slim enough money to buy a house. Sim changes her name to Erin and buys a house for her and Gracie, however Mitch tracks her down again, begging for forgiveness. When Sim refuses, Mitch becomes physically violent again. Sim goes into hiding in San Francisco, where she learns self-defense and Krav Maga. Upon her return, she breaks into Mitch's house and waits for him to get home when she challenges him to a fight. They fight and Sim manages to beat him unconscious. Sim calls her friend after the fight, and Mitch gets up and hits her from behind with a lamp. The fight continues until Sim then pushes Mitch off of the balcony to his death in self-defense. Sim and Gracie move to Seattle and live with Joe.
The individual. When a child in their developmental stages is subjected to an environment filled with violence, they are more likely to have issues physically, mentally, and socially. Physically, it can cause lifelong injuries and even result in death. And for children, it can create high levels of trauma and PTSD, which they can then bring on with them into their future. Mentally, it can cause depression, anxiety, poor self-esteem issues, and loneliness. Socially, it can cause an inability to form friendships and a difficulty to form intimate relationships. And all of these can be carried on into adulthood from childhood, making the effects of family violence long-term. Research by Conan suggests that exposure to domestic violence tends to lead to poor IQ levels, as it can affect their neurocognitive development. Studies show that children who are exposed to domestic violence can have up to 8 IQ points lower than children who do not have the same experience with violence. However, despite the odds, cases of resilience may emerge. In 2002, a gene study in New Zealand found that some children have a specific makeup of genes that make them protected against the psychological effects that come with experiencing high levels of violence. Survivors of violence can also go on to promote awareness and make a change by inspiring others and using their voice. The implications on the family. Regular occurrences of conflict can leave those who experience it with ongoing trauma and anxiety. For young children, it can lead to developing attachment issues, such as the difficulty to find an emotional connection with other people, or finding it hard to accept affection as they never received it from younger ages, making them feel insecure about themselves as they feel as if they don't deserve it since they never experienced it from a young age. Another implication is a breakup of families. This can cause younger children to have a personality change, as a breakup of families can affect them mentally and can cause them to act out in home or at school. They can become more aggressive towards a caregiver, lack motivation for school, and other activities they used to enjoy, and also an increase in mood swings. It can also lead to their safety being in danger. For example, in 2017, more than 1 in 3 murders recorded by police were related to family and domestic violence, according to the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare. The implications on society. Domestic and family violence is estimated to cost the New South Wales economy at least $13.6 billion each year, and it will only rise if action is not taken to reduce the rates of family violence. The issues of employment. Experiencing violence in your home can leave you with a greater risk of developing mental illnesses, which make it difficult for the victims to even leave their house, let alone work without feeling anxiety, fearfulness over their life, and a lack of purpose or motivation within their life. It can also bring up distress for the victims as they may be stalked or harassed in their place of work. All this economically affects the community as businesses will be left to deal with the high turnover rates, low job motivation, lack of work ethic, lateness, absenteeism, which tends to build up costs over time, which ends up leading to business losses rather than gain. The issues of homelessness. According to the Commonwealth of Australia, domestic violence is Australia's #1 driving factor to homelessness, and according to the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare, 42% of those a part of the homelessness services have experienced family and domestic violence. This may be because it is the only means of escape for them. This in turn affects the community as they are not receiving an income, therefore they should or would be receiving financial assistance from the government. Young children who become victims of homelessness have an increased risk of developing mental or physical illnesses. They may also develop risk-taking behaviours such as drug taking as a coping strategy or possess unlawful behaviours such as stealing as a way to survive. There are thousands of domestic violence services across Australia that are accommodating to all situations, such as online counselling through helplines. Most helplines provide a free listening service by trained counsellors. The Kids Helpline is one. The Kids Helpline is a free and confidential service that provides an over-the-phone and online support system that children can access whenever they're feeling scared, angry, or just want someone to talk to. It is a potentially life-saving service for children who are feeling suicidal or lonely. Another one is the New South Wales Domestic Violence Line, which appoints caseworkers to assess your situation and helps develop a safety plan to ensure the safety of those victimised. This can be done by providing support, spreading knowledge, and even providing emergency accommodations. The benefits of helplines are that they are discreet and you can remain anonymous. They're 24/7, so always available, and they're easily accessible for anyone, no matter where you are. And they also provide an ongoing tailored support and strategies to help you cope with what you're going through. However, the downside is that there are waiting times and it may not be the best help for serious mental problems. Child protection services such as the Family and Community Services New South Wales, also known as FACS, can provide a service to children and families to ensure the protection against violence and harm. They provide services to those with disabilities, can provide temporary housing, and they also create stability, and they operate a reporting system in which individuals are able to report a child if they seem like they are being neglected or abused. On the downside, there may not be enough housing available. Victims may feel embarrassed as there is less privacy on FACS, and also the offender may become more provoked or violent if they find out they are being reported. There is also a legal route you can take, apprehended violence orders, AVOs, which is simply a court-made restriction on an offender to not be able to come within a certain distance of the victim in order to protect them from fear and violence. If the offender is caught breaking the order, they can be criminally charged. AVOs have been successful in providing accessibility as anyone over the age of 16 is able to apply for one, and they have created a sense of safety for victims. However, it isn't always necessarily a barrier of protection as victims are still being harmed by their offender regardless of a court order or not. Child protection